Hi, this is Rick Holmstrom. I'm a guitar player. I play with Mavis Staples and my own band, and you're listening to Talking Blues.
So I was going to say that when I first began this podcast almost 10 years ago, I had an idea of what I wanted it to be. And on episode 5, I reached that goal, or I thought this is what I wanted this podcast to be, and that was the episode that you were on,
Oh,
which was many years ago. But when we finished that interview, and I think it was at the Kitchener Blues Festival, I thought that's what I'm going after. So I thank you for that. And for anybody who hasn't heard it, it is Talking Blues Podcast episode 5, and Rick talks about growing up in Alaska and how he got into music, how he was into writing and journalism, how you got into music and your early career, a musical career. So I definitely encourage people to check that out. I kind of want to go from that point on and go deeper into, I guess, the last 10 years almost of your career. And maybe go back to some of the earlier stuff that I might have not asked about. And I'll begin with Junior Watson. I think he played a big role, or he was an influence to you. Can you talk a little bit about Junior Watson?
sure. Junior Watson. I was playing with Rod Piazza and the Mighty Flyers in 1987 when I first really got into the blues scene in Los Angeles. I went to see him, and I was 21 years old, just got out of college, had just played for a few months in my first band with some friends in college. And I was doing this deep dive on guitar players in the area. And I walked up I saw the guy play a set, but he had one of those bowling shirts on and it said like, Bill or Buddy or something like that. John, I don't know. And I walked up to him, I go, "Hey, you said you're great, man. What's your name? Where's Junior?" He goes, "I am Junior." You know, I was so green I didn't realize that people wore shirts that had other people's names on it for a joke. And we've been friends ever since, and still are friends. And he's a very inventive, different guitarist who goes left when everybody else goes right. Um, very much a tone monster, a great rhythm guitar player, just a fiery lead guitar player. And he went on to play with Canned Heat for a bunch of years, Kim Wilson, and he's backed up. He backed up William Clark. Obviously, he played on a lot of James Harmon records, a lot of William Clark records, Rod Piazza records, Linwood Slim. I know I'm leaving a bunch of people off, but huge influence on me, just in what records to check out, what guitars are cool to get into, amplifiers, speakers, all the little esoteric things that help you when you're, in your early 20s and you're just learning how to play.
And as a young musician approaching somebody like him, he was very open to sharing those things with you.
Yeah, I think he was open to me. We sat down with a couple of guitars at one point and played some, and I was not very good, and he must have thought I had something. I remember him saying, "That's pretty cool. You're kind of doing your own thing right there." He goes, I like how you're doing your own thing with it." And I don't know if that was code for like, "You don't know shit, kid. You better get it together." But it was encouraging to me at the time.
Okay, so when you talk to somebody like him who's very inventive, who's very different from everybody else, do you automatically recognize that?
Yeah, because uh, I had been going into clubs and watching a lot of people, and there was something odd about him and very unpredictable and exciting about his playing and his sound. and I latched onto that right away. He played different guitars. He had different sound. He used he came up with different melodies. He didn't just the thing about Junior is he doesn't just play a bunch of flurry of notes. He plays melodies and ideas, and I appreciated that. You know,
And then when he said, "Well, you have your own thing going," and whether, I mean, I presume he meant it. Did you recognize that in yourself?
no, no, I was really just starting to play the guitar, and my thing was I would put on records and I would jam to the records pretty much endlessly. And but I didn't really pick stuff apart note by note very much, maybe a little bit here and there. I just felt like I was so far behind everybody because I started really late that I wanted to get good fast. And like, one thing that happened to me during the pandemic was because all the work stopped and you're just home all the time, I started putting on records that I used to jam to when I was 20, 21 years old. And like Little Milton records, Freddie King records, Magic Sam, T-Bone, Lowell Folsom, people like that. And I realized, oh, I played that wrong all along. I was one fret off, and I had this like rudimentary things. Like I kind of took myself to school for months on the rudiments of some of these guys' style, and it was really fun for me, and to dive back into that and realize, man, I had the spirit, but I had some stuff wrong because I started so late. I was just trying to get from 0 to 60 as fast as I could so that I could kind of play.
I wonder when you felt that you could play. Like, I know that I've heard you talk about going on the road with William Clark and feeling like you really didn't belong in that band initially. And you worked hard for 3 years. And then you worked with Johnny Dyer. And I mean, he played such a key role, I think, in getting him recorded and having him go on the road. Was that around the time that you felt that maybe you were a decent guitar player?
Okay, so I got the gig with William Clark in spring of 1989 and didn't belong in that band. I was the worst guy out of 5 people in that band. But we played so much and the stakes were pretty high everywhere we went. Bill had just gotten signed by Alligator. It was kind of a big deal, you know. Um, yeah, he was very excited about that. And so I was just practicing constantly. Um, and so I would say around 90, maybe the beginning of 91, end of 90, a couple years into my thing with Bill, I started to get some confidence and started to feel good. One night I went out to see Alex Schultz play with Rod Piazza because Junior had left the Mighty Flyers to go to Canned Heat. Alex had taken his spot, and Alex had played with William Clark before me. So I went to see Alex play, and Rod called me up to play. And that was probably 1990, I would guess, something like that. And Rod just called off all these Little Walter and Muddy and George Smith type stuff. It was the end of the night. I might have played 3 or 4 songs with him. And he pulled me aside after that and said, "Man, I love playing with you. You play all the guitar I want to hear. Keep up. I'm keeping my eye on you."
Wow.
And so that's kind of around the time I started to get some confidence. Then when I left Bill in 91, like that towards the end of 91, started playing with Johnny. I played a little bit with Al Blake from the Hollywood Fats Band, but he was mostly working full time. So Johnny and I started doing gigs together. That's kind of really where my confidence, getting it from guys like Johnny, Smokey Wilson, people like that, they'll build your confidence up real fast. You know, it's,
And the fact that you've played with these people who are, the giants in the blues scene, right?
there
Like
was,
William Clark and Rod Piazza. I mean, we're talking heavy names in harmonica blues.
yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a difference between Little Walter and Sonny Boy and, William Clark to me because those guys were the originators. But Bill and Rod and Johnny and James Harmon and Linwood Slim and people like that, Kim Wilson, certainly carry the flame, well and do their own thing with it. And so it was a fertile time to be a young musician on the scene here because there was so many bands, so many clubs, so many people were touring. You could play just hundreds of nights a year, set after set, and then we'd be playing with William Clark and Finest Tasby would come down after work, or Curtis Griffin, Louisiana Guitar Red, Smokey Wilson, Philip Walker, Doug McLeod, Steve Samuels, Junior Watson. These people would just show up at our gigs and sit in. So I'm backing up Jimmy Rogers, or just really, it was such an immersion in all things blues that I soaked it up as much as I could.
Did you said you started late and you felt like you always had to catch up and work really hard at it. Did you have an idea of what you wanted that to lead you to?
No, not really. I mean, at first, I remember going to the Lighthouse, um, which is a famous like jazz and blues, mostly jazz club in Hermosa Beach. Before I was a professional, I was probably 20 or so. And I went with a basketball coach friend of mine who's still a basketball coach now. And there was a band playing, and I just thought it was the coolest thing to play in a band at a club, and there's people coming in and they're dancing. And I said to my friend, who's also from Fairbanks, Alaska, his name is Mike Dunlap. I said, man, I really want to do this. And he looks at me and goes, stop talking about it, then do it. And I had just gone to college for 4 years and got my degree in business and minor in political science. And I was freelance writing and I was plucking around on the guitar a little bit. But it took me a couple of years before when I was with Bill Clark on the road, I was still doing freelance writing on the side because I hadn't decided, I don't know if I can do this. Um, so to answer your question, all I wanted to do at first was to play music in a band with people, and that was a great feeling. Um, Later, maybe after Bill Clark and when I got into playing with Johnny and stuff, I started looking at people like Junior or Jimmy Vaughn or um, some of the people that I looked up to at that time and thought that'd be cool to be able to make a career of that and be known for being good at this. Before it was just, man, that would be fun, you know.
Do you, do you remember when and I don't know if there was a moment at all, but when you might have looked at it and said, "Oh my God, I've reached that point." Like, was it? I can imagine touring with Rod would be a major plateau, but I don't know if you felt like, "Oh, I've kind of made it."
Well, I don't know if you ever feel like you make it as a musician, just because it's such a struggle. But I think when I was with Rod, there was I mean, I remember one night in Long Beach at the Blue Cafe when I first got the gig. Junior was there, Kid Ramos was there, Steve Samuels, and a few other younger up and coming guitar players were there. And I had what I would consider a very bad first set. And I went up to Rod at halftime, during the break, and man, I'm stinking. I'm thinking about Watson being here, and he goes, man, he goes, there's a reason I hired you. Those guys are the shit. Now you are the shit. And, stop thinking about yourself, stop thinking about the licks that you're playing or missing or anything, and start trying to make the drummer look good. He goes, you know, think about making the drummer look good. I'm like, that's interesting. I never thought of that. And I came out the second set and just focused on that, and everything fixed itself. And so I think he instilled a lot of confidence in me. And right around the time, like you say, right around the time I was in Rod's band for a few years, I probably started to think like, I might be able to do this for a while.
Can you elaborate on that idea of making the drummer look good?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever done yoga or meditate or um, hike or anything like that. You know, if you like a yoga instructor will tell you to focus on the breath. And so you get into this thing of the cycle of the breath, the inhale and the exhale, then lengthening it, making, and pretty soon your muscles start to relax and you stop thinking about the tightness in your back or your calf or something or your shoulder. And it becomes something you go outside of yourself a little bit and you stop thinking about your own problems or your own fixations. Well, if you're playing music, if you're thinking, you're stinking, basically. And so if you're thinking about like what if you're imagining what other people are seeing, or you're worried about how you look or what you sound like or your tone or anything like that, that's bad. So if you can focus on making somebody else look good, and and smiling at that person and nodding your head and getting into the groove with them, then they play. Pretty soon you develop this thing going back and forth between the guitar and the drums, and the bass and the guitar, and all of a sudden you've gotten out of your own head, you've gotten out
Right.
of your own way, and then it starts to flow. And Rod was so right about that. Just make the drummer look good.
I mean, I can imagine throughout the years, and especially with Mavis, the situation that you find yourself in so many different gigs of so many different sizes, such a different audience base, and the festivals that might be small and humongous. I would presume that kind of advice goes a long way.
Yeah, it's between that and just breathing, just taking long, slow inhales. Like that's another thing. Yoga did help me uh, as a musician, I believe, especially when the stakes got higher. Like when I was with Mavis and we were doing TV, and you record a record with, like we recorded "You're Not Alone" with Jeff Tweedy, and then we find ourselves uh, on TV doing the Colbert Show, and we've got Jeff Tweedy with us, and I'm
Right.
taking a solo, and or I'm starting the song off, and they count it down, and you're in front of a TV audience, and all your family and all your friends are watching, and people are putting it on YouTube and every. You don't want to be the one that screwed it up. So between long, deep breaths and trying to make the drummer look good, that's helped me immensely, because otherwise you can get so tight and you're trying so hard, and that's really bad. It's like you don't want to be in that. You just want to, like, I know this is pressure. I know, but I'm going to deep I'm going to breathe really deep right before my solo, and I'm going to let it out as slow as I can while I'm soloing. And boom, it just comes out.
When did yoga come into your life? How did that happen?
Well, my wife and her sister um, and my brother-in-law were going to classes quite a bit, and they kept because I'm a kind of a workout, running, hiking, fitness kind of fanatic anyway, and they kept saying, "I really think you should try this yoga stuff, Rick. I think you'd like it." And I don't want to be in a class full of sweaty, people all close together, all that stuff, you know. But they were right, and I got a really great yoga instructor named Brad Kymack, who teaches you a lot more about yourself and your potential, and like I said, breathing and humility and things like that than you would think. Like there's life lessons in it that are more than just like I'm no good at yoga. Like I'm tight. I have tight hamstrings and hips and everything. So it's a constant thing as I get older. I'm almost 60. I'll be 60 in May. So, you know, it's been really helpful for me physically and mentally. Yeah.
And at what point did you realize that? Like how much time did it take for you to go, yeah, this is working. This is good for me.
Probably two or three classes in, I started to like, yeah, this is. At first, I was like, yeah, that's not much of a workout, and I'm going to go for a run. I would run to the yoga class, so I'd get there sweaty, and we they had this guy had yoga uh, classes on the beach. So you bring a towel. I'd run about 20 minutes, do this class, and then run back. That was a great workout. But if it was just the class, for me, it was like, eh. But I started to realize that it's. I mean, as a runner, so much of what you do is pounding on pavement or pounding into the ground. So you want to do all these things that are counter to that, that pull away and strengthen and lengthen muscles rather than tightening them. Uh, but the biggest thing for me has just been, uh, and I was been breathing, but I had also had, back issues like all of us have as we get older. But I had been to chiropractors and neck, all this, and yoga just kind of stopped all of that.
Wow.
I haven't had to go to a chiropractor in years. It's just by being proactive with yoga.
Okay, can I ask you a few questions about your time with Mavis? So,
Yeah.
in our last interview, you talked about how you got into the band or how that whole thing happened.
Mhm.
And it's a great story. They should review it. But I'm curious as to that relationship. You're the musical director. You have been the band leader for many years. You've had members of your own band initially, like with Jeff
Mhm.
and
Hodges.
Hodges,
Yeah.
both people who I got a chance to interview. But so you have this band. They're also in the Mavis band. For one reason or another, they leave. How difficult is that when you have to replace a band member?
Yeah, that was hard. Hodge and Jeff had been in the band for 12 years with Mavis, with Mavis, and then for years before in my band, and
Right.
we're all playing everybody else's gigs, and I did gigs and things that Hodges booked and played gigs with Jeff also under his name. But they just wanted to do other things. I mean, 12 years is a long time. So Jeff wanted to he went to community college, took art classes, and is now a painter, and and very good painter, and works at an art supply store and plays gigs on the side, and is got married. He's very fulfilled, and yet he doesn't have to sit on an airplane every few days. So
Right.
it's a good thing for him. And Hodges has been playing gigs with Mike Watt, a great punk rock bass player from the Minutemen, and a lot of other side things around town. And so it's tough, but at the same time, both of the guys that we got, who are, Steve McGallion on drums, had subbed for Stephen Hodges a few times with Mavis. And of course, I've known McGallion since 91 and have played with him. I played more with McGallion than I did with Hodges before we started the Mavis
Oh,
gig.
okay.
Yeah, we were with Johnny Dyer together and Janova Magnus and Rod Piazza and my band. McGallion had started playing with Dave Alvin before we got the Mavis gig. And so
Okay.
I looked at that and thought, well, he should keep that gig with Dave Alvin. And Dave is a friend of mine too. So, I wasn't going to go snooping around and trying to grab McGallion. So Hodges was doing the gigs with us and we grabbed him to play with Mavis. But yeah, I mean, that was tough. And then Donnie Gerard had illnesses and was out for periods of time with cancer and then passed away a few years ago. That was especially hard on all of us. Um, but the lineup that we have now, we have Greg Boaz on bass, Steve McGallion on drums, and they've been a rhythm section together with Dave Alvin for years and a lot of other people around town. They play really well together. And then we have Sandra Williams on a background vocalist who was with Sharon Jones and with the Dap Kings. And then we have Kelly Hogan on background vocals, and she's known for her years with Nico Case and the Decemberists. She has a band in Chicago called the Flat Fives, a great band. It's it's a really good iteration of the Mavis experience. Like it's a really good band right now.
But is it easy as the musical director to know that this will work? Like just because you've played with a drummer, that doesn't necessarily mean they would work in the Mavis band format,
Well, with
right?
Steve McGallion, I knew it would work because we had played so much together and I knew what he was into. He's into a lot of different types of music, but soul music, he's really, really good at like Al Jackson Jr. type stuff and um, like James Gadsden-esque type playing, but he's also a experienced blues drummer, country drummer, rock drummer. You know, he
Right.
and he builds a song from the inside out. So rather than I played with great drummers who are they from the first note that you play, they're telling you where it's going to be, and they're kind of leading things, and that's one way of approaching it. Steve is quiet. He sits there and plays quiet and grooves, keeps time, listening, finding out how to build the song from the inside out. And with Mavis, I really appreciate that because it's all about the vocals and it's all about the groove. And if Mavis is singing easily, and she doesn't have to fight the sound of the volume of the band, and if the groove is, it's either fun or not fun. It's either grooving or it's not grooving. And there's
Right.
nothing else that matters. I could make 500 mistakes in one night. And as long as it was fun, she'll look at me and go, good spicy show. You know? And so yeah, I mean, and then I knew that Greg and Steve grooved well together and liked playing together and they're best pals and I'm really good pals with Steve. And then I mean, probably the bigger question mark would be how will the background vocals come together? And we lucked out so much. I mean, Kelly Hogan was on the three records that we made with Jeff Tweedy, like so as a session singer in Chicago. So I already knew Kelly, and she had subbed a bunch of times for Vicki Randall before she was full time in the Mavis, before before Kelly got the gig. So I had experience with Kelly, and then we brought Sandra in at the urging of Paul Seabar and Jake Labatz, two friends of mine. Um, you know, I told these guys, I asked them, I'm looking for a background singer, female, and they suggested Sandra, and she just man, she just fit right in. It just the chemistry is fantastic, and you know, it's a really good Mavis band right now.
Tell me, what is your role as the musical director? What does that entail?
Well, okay, so every year we get together, usually in January or February, and 3 or 4 days in LA, rehearse up a new batch of songs. So it could be this year it was 5 new songs, and then we touched up on a few older songs. That
Who picks those songs? Is that
it's
your responsibility? Mavis's
me and
responsibility?
Mavis's manager Dave Bartlett. You know, Dave and I will usually start emailing each other ideas, and then maybe somebody in the band will suggest a song. Uh, so many people are sending songs all the time, and you know, I basically I've gotten to the point where if it's somebody outside of the group, I will just tell them to send it to her manager so that he can talk to Mavis about it. But if it's somebody in the band, I'll usually take it to Mavis or to Dave, the manager. And you know, then he talks to her about what songs she feels like adding. And then usually when we're at rehearsals, I'll sit down with Mavis with a master list and we'll cross out a few that we're maybe a little tired of or have run their course. And I think this year we're looking at 31 songs that are on the master list. And then we'll just, I'll look at that list. Usually what happens is sometime in the morning, I make up a list with a few options on it. And I'll text it to Mavis and she'll think about it for a little bit and text me back and make her picks. And sometimes it can be as simple as that, and other times something will come up in the course of the day. I might see that something happened in the news, or um, you know, I don't know, or I'll think about, hey, we're in Birmingham, Alabama, or we're in some city that might we're in Atlanta that might have a little bit of a more of an impact on how Mavis looks at playing that place that night, and go write her back and go, hey, what do you think about doing Why Am I Treated So Bad or Freedom Highway tonight instead? You know, we're in such and such city. She'd go, ah, yeah, yeah, that'd be good. Let's do that. So
That's usually triggered by you more than by her.
it can be both ways. But because my job is MD, I would say more often than not, it's triggered by me. But there are times where she'll say, you know, I really feel like singing this tonight. Um, and I'm like, great. And I love it when she does it because then I know she's bought in. You know,
Can you tell me, from your eyes, tell me about who she is as a musician? I mean, I know she's legendary. She's been around and she certainly sang some great songs, but I'm curious as to how you see her and her musical abilities and the working relationship that you have with Mavis.
well, when you talk about Mavis and musical abilities, it's just all innate and you know I don't know nurture nature. I think it's both in her case. I mean, she's been singing her whole life. And she's been recording since she was a little kid. Those pictures of her around the time when the Staple Singers started. I mean, she's just really wee little thing, you know, with this
Right.
big voice. So she doesn't know anything about notes or scales or keys or anything like that. She just sings. And so it's all feeling and experience and gut and heart with her, um, and groove. And you know, I've spent so much time with her that we can have maybe we have an opening act, and I'm sitting back there talking to Mavis. Opening act has been playing for 20, 30 minutes, and we can hear this opening act. I say, She's a good singer, huh? "Oh, yeah, she's a good singer. Yeah, she can hit them notes, but I know how to get over." She'll say something like that. Or, yeah. In other words, Mavis knows how to deliver it and get to people's hearts. And she's not thinking about artifice or fancy notes or hitting a certain pitch perfectly. It's just all guttural. It's just all coming out of uh, all those years of. I mean, like one thing I may have told you this before, but there's nights where maybe she has a cold or something, or she's battling. We've been traveling a lot, and she's not at 100%, and I can see her getting down. And I remember a few times years ago when I don't do it as much anymore because I did it a few times and it was fun for us, but she'd get a little down, and in between songs, I'd lean over and go, "Sam Cooke isn't here." She'd go, "Yeah, I know what you mean." It's like, it doesn't matter. Look, you're getting over. People are loving this. Don't worry about the fact that you're not 100% tonight. Mavis at 75 or 80, 85%, you're doing fine. And Sam Cooke isn't sitting there judging you. And I've done other, like, Mahalia isn't here tonight, Mavis. Don't sweat it. You know.
I I think we talked about this, but I was at that the Blues Music Awards, so it might have been the Handy Awards back then,
Mhm.
when you played with her
Oh, you
and
were
did
there at that?
yeah. So that was like the first or second thing you did with her, right?
It was the first thing I'd ever done with her.
So I wonder. I mean, obviously a lot has changed, but at one point or another, she came to you and said, "I want you to be in my band or get ready or whatever."
Mhm.
I wonder how long it took you to like really feel like you were a team, because it's now what, 18 years or something. Like
Yeah,
it's been a while.
18, yeah. It started in the spring of 2007. So yeah, I think I'm working on 18 years now. That's
Do you remember when it clicked? When you knew this was really the right thing?
Well, oh boy. I think, well, okay, so we went on the road with her a lot, and the people that run Anti Records decided to do a live record not long after like they saw us play with Mavis a few times and decided to do this live record. So we did a recording at the Paradiso in Amsterdam.
Absolutely.
Mavis was getting over a cold. So it was a really good night musically, but she wasn't at 100%. So they shit canned it. And then they, we ended up doing one at the Hideout in Chicago. It's a really tiny little club. And Jeff Tweedy came to the gig, and I was having a problem with my amplifier at soundcheck. And the manager introduced me to Jeff Tweedy. I was like, "Hey, really glad to meet you. I got to go." And I was trying to get my amp to stop humming, and the sound man from Buddy Guys showed up at the last minute with this device that took the hum out of my guitar amplifier. Dave Katzman, I think is his name. Thank you, Dave. And we played the gig. Like I think Downbeat was 5 minutes later. Played the gig. That turned into a live record that was nominated for a Grammy. And that night, Jeff Tweedy told told his manager and Mavis's manager, "I want to make a record with Mavis, and I want to use her band." So I think right around then was when I realized, all right, I think something's clicking here. I don't think we hadn't really found our footing yet. We were still playing a little too loud and a little too frantic back then. But there was some sense of like something going on at least. I don't know.
How has the experience of playing with Mavis changed you as a solo artist?
That's a good question. In so many ways. I mean, first off, you know, I was a guitar player first, and I only started singing in the late 90s or mid to late 90s. And I realized I don't want to have to be just a guitar sideman for the rest of my life. I better start learning how to do this other thing. And and a few years after into playing with Mavis, Jeff, the bass player, and I started singing on the Mavis gig. Like the Donnie and various backgrounds, Mavis would give us parts. They'd find a note. You sing this note, Jeff. You sing this note, and that's been incredible learning experience. I mean, most of those years, I stood in between Donnie Gerard and Mavis Staples. And sometimes I'd have Yvonne Staples to my right, sometimes Donnie. And then I had Sandra Williams. So, and I've always had Mavis. And anytime you hit a wrong note, or you're just not there, you're going to find out about it later. Not in a negative way, but uh, you might get the stink eye from Donnie, or um, so I've learned a lot. That's really informed a lot. And then I think Mavis has been so encouraging to me. I know I'm not, like a top vocalist or anything like that, but she has been encouraging to me to find my own style. And she'll say like, "You look, Pops was not, Sam Cooke. You know, Pops didn't sing like that. Pops had this real personal, idiosyncratic um, kind of singing style." And so I've tried to, I think that's one thing that's really rubbed off on me. And then just, I think I think we learned with Mavis a lot about space and dynamics and letting the microphones do the work. So don't be so frantic. Uh, Play, but don't try too hard. You know, don't get yourself all tied up in a knot. Just let it happen, and people will enjoy that. Dynamically, I think that's been the biggest change in me is learning how to play from, rather than like concentrating on from volume at 7 to volume at 12 in that range, which is where most blues guitar players live. Let's face
Right.
it. Actually, it's probably more from like 11 to 12. And I try to go from like 0 to 7 and really stay in those various low points for a while so that when I get up to 5, 6, 7, it feels like you're playing loud, but you're really not anywhere close to being that loud.
I find it interesting. One, I remember you telling me about how you used to listen to the Staple Singers on your drive home from gigs
Yeah.
in the early days, and to think that years later, there you are being called Pops Junior by Mavis, and obviously, what you have to do is be greatly influenced by Pop Staples in what you do with Mavis, I would imagine. The other thing that I find interesting is the fact that you have this thing about being an instrumentalist,
Mhm.
and yet you also sing, and I think it comes in that order. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think you probably consider yourself more of an instrumentalist, guitarist, songwriter
A
than.
man's got to know his limitations, and I know that, yeah, that
But you do an album with just all instrumentals, and then the next album you do all singing.
mhm.
Tell me about the thinking behind that. Like whether you know your imitations or not, you obviously feel the importance of songwriting with lyrics.
Yeah, I mean, it's I well, okay, so When I first started playing, I didn't sing, but the people that I played with all wanted guitar instrumentals at the beginning of the night. They want you to play an instrumental or two and then call them up and
Right.
make it a show and stretch the night out a little bit. And they want variety for people in the club. So I learned how to play in that blues, R&B, soul review tradition of, the band goes up and warms up the thing for a little bit and then brings up the star of the show. And you got to learn how to get on the microphone. You got to learn how to introduce them, how to walk them off. So having a lot of little heads is what I call them. What we call them is like it might be a jump swing in the key of B flat, but I would have numerous melodies or little heads so I could basically make up songs on the spot. Uh, so they wouldn't be like the last time somebody came out and saw us. You know,
Right.
so I always had a storehouse of instrumentals. And then when I started singing in the 90s sometimes, I didn't want to just be doing blues covers. So I started writing my version of blues songs. And then that, as my experiences or influences grew to being more into soul music and roots Americana, country rock type stuff, started bringing in more chord changes. And pretty soon I find myself on airplanes or in hotel rooms writing out lyrics, because I'm sitting down for hours.
Right.
And then you have this storehouse of songs. And, and then maybe like the pandemic comes along and we're all going a little bit stir crazy. Well, let's go in the studio. We'll wear masks. We'll stay 10 feet away from each other and record a record. And that's kind of what we did with these last two records. It's more for our sanity than anything else, just to be creative and make something today that wasn't in the room when you woke up this morning. And that's kind of what it boils down to. That's why you pick up a guitar in the first place, is that I just want to get outside of myself and I want to create something, and all of a sudden the world starts looking better, you know.
I know you're a writer, and I think you once told me you might have kept a journal for a long time.
Long time, yeah.
Do you still keep a journal?
I've been bad lately. I swear. I'll start it up, especially when we go on these tours. I wrote a lot on the last Bonnie and Trombone Shorty and Dylan tours, but then I'll get home I'll sit up in front with the bus driver and close the door to the band, and so it's just the driver and myself sitting up in front, and I'd write a lot. But then when I get home, I get so caught up in the dad, being a dad, and just daily life that I forget to do it. But I did it from the time I was about 13 all the way up until I have scores of journals in my garage, for 30 years or something.
Wow. Is your approach to writing songs different from lyric, the ones with lyrics versus your instrumental songs?
Yeah, I think because the instrumental songs can be, because I have no limitations, like the limitations that I have as a vocalist mean that there's certain songs I'm not going to try to do, or certain styles of singing. But a guitar, I can get around on the guitar fairly well, and I can make noises that I couldn't sing. Um, so yeah, there's that. And then I think the other thing that I think about a lot is I like them to complement each other. So I'll be writing instrumentals or I'll be writing vocal songs thinking about how they fit in with the overall set, or the group of songs that I have. So, sometimes you might go, I really feel like having a really upbeat song with breaks, with a bunch of breaks in it, and it's kind of like, subterranean homesick blues or something like that. But it's not. It's just that's where it
Right.
started from, and it doesn't sound anything like it when it's done. I don't know if that answers your question, but
But, instrumentals have always puzzled me because I enjoy them.
Mhm.
But when you focus on a whole album and you say, I'm just going to write 12 instrumentals, I don't know how that happens.
Oh,
And then I listened to your last album, and there's certain things that I think, oh, he must have written this because of the lick or the melody that he has. And then there are other tunes that might be less melodic but more rhythmic.
hmm.
And I don't know if most instrumentals come out of jams and that's how they're built, or if you sit there and go, yeah, I want to write a song like this.
No, I think it comes all kinds of different ways, but most of those instrumentals on the last record were me. I have this place that I go to. Um, it's about a 10-minute walk from my house. It's just a park bench that I sit on in like a little wildlife reserve, tiny little wildlife reserve type of area. And there's a
Cool.
tree, and I bring a little amp and an electric guitar, and I'll sit there and sing and play. And so sometimes I'll just be playing a groove, or maybe I'll have a melody in mind, and I'll just be playing that melody for a while and thinking about what I could play that over. And it's I don't know. Sometimes it comes from something I listen to. Maybe I'm listening to a lot of Tiny Grimes or Lightning Hopkins or I don't know, just all kinds of stuff. I'm listening to music all the time, and um, I don't really know how to answer that question. It kind of just comes organically, and then when I think I've got something that's worth remembering, I'll record it on my phone on voice memos,
Right.
save it as an idea, and come back to it later and work on it. Maybe I'll send it to Steve McGallion, our drummer. I'm still in a band called the Gimme Fives. This is an all instrumental band that's in the vein of Booker T and the MGs or the Meters, like organ, bass, drums, guitar. And really great musicians. The organ player plays with Ziggy Marley. The drummer uh, is, I mean, they're just really great musicians, all of them. And but we go into a club and play a whole night of instrumental music. So that widens my um, my options or my experiences a little bit too. Uh, but I like instrumental music, and I've made 3 instrumental records at this point. And but the last one that I made, Get It, what I was really thinking was, I just want somebody to put this on at a barbecue and have it be background music while you're with some friends, and you know, not to just to be good time music with some variety, but not to be too much of a like, hey, everybody stop what they're doing, you know. Like I want it to be like Booker, like the MGs,
Right.
something like that, or the Meters.
Was there a point when you think about how you got into the music scene with all the blues greats and following that path and playing with all the great harmonica players? At one point or another, you obviously made a decision not to just do blues.
Mhm.
Do you remember, was that a conscious decision? Is that something that just happened organically, or how did that happen?
It happened organically. I was with Rod Piazza, and how that worked with Rod was Rod and Honey would travel in a minivan with a driver, and then Bill Stuvey, Steve McGallion, or Jimmy Bott, when I first got in the band, and myself would be in a 15-passenger Ford van with all the merch and drums and our amps and stuff. So the three of us would travel, and when during that 7 years that I was in that band with Steve McGallion, we would listen to like it's sort of like you'd get out on the road, and the last thing you really want to do is listen to the kind of music that you're playing every night.
Right.
Even though I still love Little Walter to this day, and I love George Smith and Sonny Boy and all of that, I didn't want to listen to those songs if I was playing them that night. So we'd be listening to soul music or singer-songwriters like Steve Earle. I remember when Tom Petty's Wildflowers came out. and like, wow, that is some fantastic songwriting, man. But a lot of like Arthur Alexander and uh, Otis Redding and Sam and Dave and Wilson Pickett, and then world music, Cuban, Brazilian, African music, just anything you could do to spark some sort of inspiration. And right around, let's see, when would that have been? Like the late 90s, I played Steve McGallion, Jeff Termes, and Smokey Hormel, and I were the band on an R.L. Burnside record called Wish I Was in Heaven Sitting Down.
Right.
And what they did was they had us come in and they'd say, I want you to listen to this Lowell Folsom version of Tramp. And we'd listen to 2 or 3 minutes of it and go, okay, let's record you guys playing something like that. Slim Harpo, Tip on In, you know, on and on. We did all, and the producer of the record was in the in the control room, just kind of mumbling words, as we played these things. And then they took our sounds and our performances and chopped them up and looped them in like hip hop technology. Rather than sampling old records, they sampled us, and they created this R.L. Burnside record. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head, like, wow, you know. I remember going into a record store in Santa Monica on the 3rd Street Promenade and R.L. Burnside playing and seeing young kids going like this, that are like hip hop fans and stuff. Wow, that's cool. Like, that's a way of reaching young people that I never even considered that. And so I got together with Andy Calkins, the same producer that was producing that RO record, and we made Hydraulic Groove.
Mm-hmm.
And his whole pitch to me about making that record is, you don't change a thing that you do. We go in, we record blues, and then we chop it up. But you don't think about anything else than just doing what comes naturally to you. And it's a really cool way to do it. It's a lot better, in my opinion, than to go, man, I got to turn into Stevie Ray Vaughan right now. Right?
Right.
I got to turn into whoever's selling records, whatever. Um, it was more of like, you've got these sounds and these approaches and these ways of playing, these melodies and grooves and stuff, and let's just chop them up and turn them into something like a remix. So that's kind of where it started for me. That would have been like late 90s into 2000. That record came out in 2002. That's when I left Rod Piazza to go do my own thing with that band. Um, and then ever since then, it's just been, I'll go off and get into some thing for a while. In 2003, I saw Neil Young live with Crazy Horse. I was coming back from the Ottawa Blues Festival. I played with Steve McGallion and our friend Lucas Cheadle, and we're driving down get into New York State, stop somewhere. God, it'd be great we have a night off. It'd be great to go see some music. And Neil Young is playing nearby. So we drove the van to this festival. Lucinda Williams was opening. Unfortunately, we got there just as she was ending. And then I just remember laying on the lawn with all this pot smoke everywhere, and I'm drinking a beer or whatever, and I'm listening to Neil Young, and it blew my mind. And so I spent probably a year deep in a Neil Young thing, like around 2003, 4. And then if you listen to the record that I put out in 2007, uh, which is called Late in the Night, you can hear that come in. But it's also filtered through my love of blues.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of how it works for me.
So what next? I know you're doing some gates with Mavis, and I think you're coming to Toronto sometime in the summer. But what next in general for you?
Saturday, I leave to go to Tokyo. We're playing 3 nights in Tokyo with Mavis. So I'll be gone for almost a week for that with travel days and everything. I've never been there, so I'm looking forward to that.
I'm surprised you've never been there.
No, I've only been to the airport once on our way to Singapore. I don't really consider that really being.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It just never worked out. The offers that would come in would, I guess, just not be right for Mavis, but this time it was right. So we're gonna do that, and then our spring is kind of light, and then we have a summer that's starting to fill in more. Um, we have a record that's coming out, I think, in November, and then it looks like we'll probably tour a good deal in once that record comes out. So the end of 25 and into 26. But Mavis is 85 years old, so
Hmm.
you know, um, she's kicking our ass. She's kicking ass. She's on fire. But I'm
Like you've
also,
been on some really long road like tours, right? Like over the last few years.
yeah. I mean, we don't we. The cool thing with her though is it's all pretty civilized. We'll go out. It'll look like a lot, but there'll always be a break after 2 or 3 weeks. I think the hardest year we did was a couple years ago. We did a tour with Trombone Shorty, Ziggy Marley, and Robert Randolph. And that one just about made Mavis retire. I mean, those guys were all great. It was a really fun experience, but it was a lot for all of us, and I can only imagine how much it was for her. But so yeah, I mean, hopefully she wants to keep doing this. Fingers crossed. I can't stress enough how great the new version of Mavis's band is. We've had this version now for 5 years, and I think it's really something. And if folks haven't seen Mavis or seen this band, I would really encourage them to. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I'm saying that because I believe it. Kelly, Son, Greg, and Steve, and Mavis and I, we're a really cool. It's a lot of chemistry going on stage.
I certainly believe it.
Oh, you know what we didn't talk about though, Marco? We didn't talk about Steve Mariner and Adam Wood.
Yes, well, I was going to ask you about that next. Is that, I mean, I finally got a chance to see you last fall, November or December, doing your own thing, and you had done a short tour with Steve Mariner, and
Adam Warner.
and it was amazing because all of a sudden, I think I said to you, all of a sudden everything made sense to me.
Well,
You know, I'd seen you so many times with Mavis, but not doing your own thing, and I've been listening to your own stuff for a while, and to see it in person, and I don't know how. I think you said it was pretty reflective of what you do because it must be difficult to just put together a band in a short period of time and go on a little tour. But it was an amazing show.
thank you. Normally that would be the case, but with Steve and Adam, it wasn't. It was amazing. Like I knew Steve sometime in the early 2000s. I met him at a blues festival somewhere, and he was a big fan of Hydraulic Groove. And actually, I think I had met him when he was younger because he was playing with a guitar player from
J.W. Jones.
JW. Yeah, he was playing with,
Yeah.
yeah, JW. I met him then when I was with Rod. But we had always talked, we would get together and talk, or we'd have some beers or get a hamburger or something, at a festival. And we got to play together. And we had never played together, period, until I came up there this last November, got together with those guys in Steve's studio, started playing, and immediately it was, wow, this feels like my band. Feels really good. And they both sing their tails off also. So you have this thing where you have three people singing. Um, it's always a good thing. Harmony vocals are great. I just loved it. It was really a great experience. I mean, we played 4 gigs up there. We played Ottawa. We played Toronto. We played a little place outside of Toronto.
Right.
A couple little places outside of Toronto. Sold out venues. I can't say enough good things about those two. And you know, Steve is just, if you're not familiar with Steve Mariner, you should get yourself familiar with,
He's the man.
I know you are, but if you're from Ottawa or Toronto or anywhere in Canada, check him out. Monkey Junk, his great trio that he plays with Tony and
Matzo.
Matt and Tony. They're badasses. And then he also plays with Colin James and all kinds of other. I mean, he is a Canadian. He's a jewel.
Hmm.
I'll put it that way. He's a gem, and you should be proud of him.
So there's a chance that this could happen again?
Yeah, in fact, he just texted me earlier this week about a possibility um, somewhere else in Canada, and I'm waiting to find out. It would be next summer. I'm waiting to find out that week what's going on that weekend with Mavis. But if it's open, I'll do it in a heartbeat because they're a fantastic band. It's a lot of fun, and you know, it's good hand.
You know what I loved about and it wasn't the only thing, but what I loved about it is just being able to see you do your own thing, for one. And then the other thing was you're talking about space in songs and dynamics. And a few times you ended the song, you faded out the song, or the band faded out. Not just once, but a few times. And it was so well done.
Oh,
You know,
thanks.
and talking about doing the dynamics thing, I really enjoyed that show. And it was
Thank
a
you.
real pleasure to see you.
Thank you. The fade outs. We did a gig recently with Steve Berlin. My trio did a gig with Steve Berlin, the sax player and you know keyboardist with Los Lobos. And he's like, "You guys are the masters of the fade out." Like he couldn't believe it. And to us, we just do it. It doesn't. It's like it's almost like an excuse for not having an ending, you know, a proper ending. And some songs have the ba ba da da ba da da bang, you know, you have this
Yeah, yeah.
ending, and then there's other times where I don't know, just let's just play for a while and then just let it fade away. And somehow that's kind of become our one of our things. And then the dynamic thing about it for me is I saw Mose Allison a couple of times before he passed away, and I also saw Ahmad Jamal, and both of them were the kings of dynamics, especially Ahmad Jamal. And that really rubbed off on me. And so I emulate that. I have no interest in volume or wheelie wheelie or rah 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 guitar solos.
Right.
Just not my thing. You know, I mean, I can make some racket. I can play some, but I'm not that guy. I'm more, I want to be the guitar version of Mose Allison or, you know, I mean, that's kind of pretentious to say, but I look up to people like Ahmad Jamal and Mose Allison, you know.
Okay, when we began and I asked you about getting to a point where you felt like you'd succeeded, and you said, as a musician, I don't know if anybody ever feels that way. But I guess when you've been touring with Mavis for 18 years, do you not feel that way at times?
Well, a little bit, but I have to remember, and I'm also going to tell you, my Mac will sleep soon unless plugged
Okay,
into it.
we're almost done. This is,
But if I go away, you'll know why. But I'm with Mavis Staples, and I know who butters my bread, and I know that stuff. I know that I'm pretty good. But I, like anybody, am filled with insecurity. Or any musician, artistic type. I don't know what's going to happen after in my next thing that happens, and I
right.
worry about it. I think I'm pretty good. I'll probably do all right, but I don't even. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I don't know what the right answer is, but what a way to put this. It never ends, and maybe it should never end. You should always be thinking that you're not good enough, because like when we get done, I've got a guitar sitting right there and a stack of songs that I want to work on. And as soon as we're done, I'm not going to walk around thinking how cool I am. because I just did an interview with you. I'm going to be
Right.
like, I lost an hour and a half and I need to get back to work. And it's fun. Don't take it the wrong way. Yeah.
I understand.
I think that's the way it should be.
Right. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
And as I felt many years ago how grateful I was to have that interview with you and that it was what I wanted to do, I feel the same way today. So
That's
thank
cool.
you so much.
Cool to hear. All right. Well, good luck with everything. And
Thank you.
I'll see you, I don't know,
Hopefully
sometime in Toronto.
when you come to Toronto.
Yeah.
I would love to see you.
All right. Take care.
Great. You too. Thanks.